session. Apologize for running just a little bit late there. And I'd like to turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to City Attorney Chad Sublette. We're going to ask to go into executive session in two different instances this evening.
Council, I just asked for a motion to recess into executive session for a period of about 15 minutes to consult with Carl Wingert, Jackie Russell, and Shannon Langston regarding attorney-client privilege matters.
I would make a motion.
Second, all in favor, raise your right hand. We are in executive session.
We'll call the council meeting to order. If everyone will take their places, and if you would rise and give your attention to Councilwoman Everhart for the invocation to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
I would just ask if you join me in a moment of silence. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no proclamations this evening, and I don't believe there are any presentations. Therefore, we will proceed with the roll call. The clerk will read.
Ms. Hiller?
Here.
Mr. Campos?
Here.
Ms. Ortiz?
Here.
Ms. Everhart?
Here.
Ms. De La Isla?
Here.
Mr. Van Speaker?
Here.
Ms. Schwartz?
Here.
And Mr. Harmon?
And I am here.
Oh, sorry.
Just checking. I want to make that clear. The next item is a consent agenda. There are no additions to it, so the clerk will read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember John Campos II, granting Sacred Heart St. Joseph Parish an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 et seq. Concerning noise prohibitions. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Chad Mann, Speaker, granting the Loft at College Hill an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 et seq. Concerning noise prohibitions. C is minutes of the regular meeting of May 7th, 2013, and there is a list of open after midnight license applications before you.
Okay, you have heard the consent agenda. What is your action? Mrs. Ortiz?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
It's been moved by Mrs. Ortiz and seconded by Mrs. Everhart to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no.
We have 8 yes.
Having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved. The next item is unfinished business. The first item is an ordinance on refunding bonds.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson authorizing the issuance of $20,335,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2013A, of the City of Topeka, Kansas, under the authority of KSA 10-101 to 125 inclusive, and KSA 10-427 et sec, all as amended. Final reading.
Mr. Colson?
Mayor, thank you very much. At this time, I would like to introduce Dennis Lloyd, who many of you know. He's partners with Jeff White, Columbia Capital, and he's going to present information on the sale of the bonds. And Phil Wolf, also the city's bond attorney, is available to answer any questions that you may have.
And also, the clerk read a different amount, which is what the actual bonds were sold for, I believe, today. So, just so the council is aware, that's appropriate in the first reading, that it is corrected then. Thank you, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you. Today, the city received 7 bids from different firms for its bonds that were offered. These are bonds that are refunding some of its prior outstanding bonds. The transaction will produce savings of $1.3 million over the 18-year term that remains, which represents a 6.25% present value savings. The interest rate on the bonds, the winning bid was just under 2.3% over the life of the bonds. This is a very respectable level of savings, and it exceeds the city's target of 5% for these types of transactions. The total amount of the bond issue is $20,335,000, which will refund and pay off an escrow of $21,445,000 for the prior bond issues. Is there any questions?
Are there questions, Mr. Lloyd? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other, yes, Mrs. Everhart?
I would just move approval.
Okay, it's the approval of the general obligation bond has been moved. Mr. Schwartz seconds. Is there discussion? Mr. Harmon?
Do we need to amend the ordinance to reflect any actual?
I don't believe, I think that was, I got that clarified earlier. If it's read in that manner, it is okay to go with it as it is.
If I
Thank
could,
you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll address that very quickly. You may recall, Councilmember Harmon, that 2 weeks ago or several weeks ago, when you had the refunding revenue bond issue, you had the same situation. The reason for that is that obviously on ordinances adopted by the City Council, they're considered on 2 readings. The first reading occurs, of course, prior to the actual sale. The actual sale occurred this morning, and it's only at that point in time that you know the actual amount of bonds that are going to be issued. The first reading ordinance was an approximate amount. This represents the final, and of course it can be changed to reflect the actual circumstances of the sale involved, which is what occurred.
Thank you. Are there other questions? If Mrs. Hiller?
Well, it looks like we opted not to refinance some bonds that we had considered refinancing at first.
Well, when a decision is made in the final analysis as to what you refund, you don't want to take more potential refunding candidates off the table if the elements of the market on a given maturity aren't as advantageous as you would hope to achieve. What Columbia Capital, and they can certainly address this if they wish to, wanted to do with respect to certain maturities that were at an interest rate that could not be refunded as efficiently in the marketplace today as they might be able to be done in the future. We didn't want to take those off the table for future refunding opportunities.
That's what it looked like.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate that.
Thank
bet.
you. Other questions? If not, all those in favor of approving the ordinance, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the refunding bonds ordinance is approved. We'll go to new business, and item A is a resolution on the same bond act, which gives us permission to actually carry it out. Read.
A is a resolution introduced by City Manager Jim Colson prescribing the form and details of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2013A of the City of Topeka, Kansas, in the aggregate principal amount of $20,335,000, the issuance of which were authorized by the city pursuant to its ordinance number 19818, adopted and approved May 14th, 2013, and authorizing certain other documents and actions in connection with the issuance of the bonds.
Mr. Colson?
Thank you, Mayor. As you indicated, that would be the same presentation. We're available to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there questions, or what is your pleasure? Mr. Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. And I'd move to approve the resolution.
It's been moved and approved by, and seconded by Mrs. De La Isla. Are there questions? All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the resolution on the obligation bonds is approved. The second item of new business is a real estate report. If the clerk would read.
B is approval of a real estate report introduced by City Manager Jim Colson for the disposal of City of Topeka surplus property located at the northwest corner of Southwest 20th Street and South Kansas Avenue.
Mr. Colson?
Thank you very much, Mayor. Approval would authorize the disposal of City of Topeka surplus property. Brad Reef, interim H&D director, is not here? Oh, sorry.
Bob Kennedy, I'm real estate officer.
Thanks, Bob.
Any questions?
Mr. Kennedy, are there questions on the issue? Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, what is on there now? Is it just vacant?
It's a vacant land. It's not developable, I have trouble with that word, under our building codes, so nothing can be built on it. It was acquired a number of years ago. It's confusing to me whether it was acquired for right-of-way initially or for flood control. I think the latter, probably.
I'm trying to, I didn't get a chance to go by there, but I'm trying to, is this on the north side of the
It's the northwest
creek?
corner of the 20th and Kansas. There's a flea market that's located on the
Right.
lot immediately north,
So it's to
abutting
the
it.
south of that. So it's
Right,
right
correct.
next to the creek there. Yeah.
No, it's across the street from the creek. It was probably acquired, by the way, initially, as well as property to the south toward the creek for flood control, but it's over on the other side next to that flea market.
So nothing can be built on there at
No.
all? What could they do with it?
It can be used for a parking lot, which I believe is what, this was initiated by that property owner to the north, inquiring whether it was available to be sold, which often happens. And usually when it happens like this, we sold one up on Highway 24, for example, because an adjoining business wanted to use it as a parking lot. They've actually had items on our property and the flea market, so they might store items to sell on there too.
Yes, on my route back and forth, and I believe it is used, they're using it as part of the flea market right now. So flea market goes all the way out to the sidewalk, so that's on the property.
Exactly. And so we have issues with that too, but and if it can help them and then we can get it back on a property rolls to be paying some taxes on it, then.
Okay, what is your pleasure? Mrs. Hiller?
Move to approve.
Move to approve the real estate report. Is there a second? Mrs. Ortiz seconds. There's discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I don't vote.
Thank you. We have 8 yes.
8 having voted yes, the real estate report is approved. Go to item C, the applications.
Approval of retail cereal malt beverage and scrap metal dealers license applications. There is a list before you of the retail cereal malt beverage licenses.
What is your pleasure? It is a long list. Mrs. Hiller?
Move to approve.
It's been moved to approve the applications. Is there a second? Mrs. Everhart seconds. Discussion. All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the applications are approved. We will now go to the zoning items. Item A is Armstrong Trust Ordinance. If the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located on the south side of Southwest 37th Street, approximately 400 feet west of Southwest Burlingame Road, from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to C2 Commercial District. Final reading.
Mr. Colson?
Thank you, Mayor. There have been a lot of questions on this particular item. I would like to take a two-step approach. First, I'd like to have City Attorney Mr. Sublette introduce the idea and how we're proceeding on this. And then I would like to ask Mr. Fiander, Planning Director, to present information on this and be available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Sublette?
Mayor, I just want to speak real briefly. We have gotten several questions, and I think some are from newer council members on the zoning issue. And I want to address kind of the ex parte piece of this just very briefly, because I know I've gotten questions from council members wanting to talk to their constituents. And I just want to be very clear, that is not a wanted the council member not to talk to their constituents. They do want to talk to their constituents. It's just that the Kansas Supreme Court in several cases, including McPherson versus Shawnee County, has said in these matters you sit as a quasi-judicial body, that you are prevented from having ex parte or communications outside of what's presented at the Planning Commission. And this evening, that you can't have those conversations with your constituents. So it's not, I know that it's not that you don't want to talk to your constituents, I know that you do, but you're limited in doing that by the Kansas Supreme Court and how the statutes work. So I just wanted to make that statement, that these are a little different than some of the other issues that you deal with, these zoning application issues. You don't necessarily sit as legislators, you sit as judges. You're confined to the information that's been presented to the Planning Department and Planning Commission. And on this specific issue, there was a public hearing some time ago when you first looked at the issue. Then there was some litigation filed, and then there's been an additional public hearing and conversations with the neighborhood association. So there have been several opportunities for people to speak on the issue. I just wanted to talk about that just briefly, so everybody was aware there won't be public comment on the issue. There will be a presentation, and then you can ask questions of Mr. Fiander after he does his presentation, but there won't be public comment because that would be ex parte communications. We'll have the presentation, and then you can ask him some questions about the evidence that was presented to the Planning Commission. So I've tried to respond to emails and get information out there, and hopefully the city has been responsive to you in needing that information. There was also some confusion, and I'm sure it'll be explained about what's before you today, because there was discussion about some PUD and then the C2. The recommendation from the commission is, the recommendation is C2. That's what's before you, is whether or not this area should be rezoned to C2. There's not option 1 and option 2. I think there was some confusion at some point, but what's before you today is whether or not to rezone this area as C2. So I know that I'll turn it over to Mr. Fiander, and he can present the information.
Are there questions for Mr. Sublette? I think Ms. Ortiz.
Okay, so what you're saying is if we're in an NIA meeting, we need to excuse ourselves then, if they're talking about it?
If you were at an NIA meeting? No, because I think that was information that was presented to the council while you were present. I don't think that excludes you from the vote.
Okay, what do we do if we get emails about it?
If you get emails about the issue, what we've done, as I understand what we've done in the past, is those emails have been forwarded to us, then we forward them to the applicant, so it's no longer ex parte communication, so that everybody's aware of what's going on. What we'd ask you is not to read those emails. You can forward them to us, and then we can forward them to the applicant. Therefore, all parties have all the information about what's occurred, so it's not an ex parte communication. It's, everybody's informed of all the information.
Okay, because I received an email on this, and before I realized what it, what I was reading, then I realized it was this. So what you're asking me to do is forward it to you?
That's what traditionally has been done in the past, and I guess I would ask you.
I've never done that in the past. I've never done that in the past. I've always just read it or printed it and put it,
All right.
you know, with this issue. So now I'm asking you, is that what we're instructed to do now?
Yes,
Oh,
because
so
that's,
what if we get letters in the mail?
then I think you forward those to us as well, and we will share those with the applicant.
Okay,
And I apologize, I was under the understanding that's how it happened in the past, because I had received emails.
no
and-
reason to apologize. And then also, I mean, there's been times that they invite me to meetings and I don't know what they're gonna talk about until I get there, and then I have excused myself stating that I cannot sit in on that.
Right.
So that's the correct form, is that correct?
Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Okay.
And the question I would ask you is, because it's a two-step process, if you received information, do you feel like you can base your decision solely on what's presented tonight? Do you feel like you can do that this evening? And if the answer to that's yes, then you can sit in judgment on the case. If you feel like you've been so dissuaded by the information you've received that you can't sit as a neutral party and only base your decision on what's presented, then you'd have to recuse yourself. So that's the ultimate question. And it's kind of the two-part test. We don't want you looking at that, but if you happen to open something and read it, after reading it, can you sit as a neutral, unbiased party and just base your decision on the information presented to you tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Manspeaker? Did you? Okay, Mrs. Everhart.
And just for some clarification, I guess, because when you're talking about the no communication, I understand that that means not talking to the parties involved, but I may be at an NIA meeting where they're not parties. They just want an update on when's the zoning going to happen. That's not the same thing.
No.
So, exactly, I was gonna say, because I know I was at an NIA meeting last night giving a presentation, and the request was, not this particular zoning issue, but when is that gonna happen on a zoning issue? And that's not parties, we're not talking about, I'm just updating people in the neighborhood about when this is going to occur.
Yeah, you're not having discussions about substantive issues with the zoning. It's just, when is that scheduled? Scheduled on this date.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Are there other questions for Mr. Sublette? Okay, Mr. Fylander?
Thank you. The property before you is at Southwest 37th and Burlingame, bounded by I-470. The rezoning request is to go from R2 or R1 single family to C2 commercial district. This identical request was before you last year, as explained in October of last year. It was not approved. It failed to garner enough votes to override a protest petition filed by the surrounding property owners. The applicant filed again this year in March with the Planning Commission. There was a neighborhood information meeting held. The only real, I guess, material or issue that has changed since that last application, since then, there was some discussion about the street in front of the property, Southwest 37th. It is a two-lane road. Since that, the first application, you did approve a project budget to improve that road from 2 to 5 lanes, beginning in the next couple of years. And so that was presented to the property owners and also the applicants so that they knew about that. Again, the Planning Commission did recommend this time around approval, consistent with the staff recommendations. As explained, a legal protest has been filed again by the surrounding property owners. I believe there will be a minimum this time of 7 votes necessary to approve the request. Staff does ask you to move to approve the ordinance and adopt the zoning change for C2.
Yeah, Mr. Fylander, I'd like to point one comment you made just then, that this has been approved to be a 5-lane road. I don't believe that's been determined. I think we're in the engineering studies because we have had people raise that issue.
Sorry.
They've heard that we're putting in a 5-lane road, and there's new reaction to that, I think, and I believe the response is, we don't know how many lanes there will be until we have the engineering study.
That's correct.
All right, okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Are there questions for Mr. Fylander?
Your Honor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hey, Bill. This matter was in our agenda packet last week. As agenda item 7B. The cover sheet, or what I call the cover sheet of this agenda item, has changed dramatically from what was presented in first readings to what we have before us tonight, in the sense that all references to the PUD have been deleted. Why is that?
For clarifications and not confuse the issue, I believe we wanted to make sure that you knew the recommendation before you was C2. The PUD is an option that staff presented to the Planning Commission really alongside the C2 option. The Planning Commission heard the testimony and adopted the recommendation for C2. That is what's before you to approve or not.
If I can follow up, Your Honor. Again, the agenda item a week ago on first readings, one of the options that were listed for the governing body was to amend the recommendation by approving a PUD zoning change by 3/4 of all governing body members. And then in the cover sheet on tonight's item, it says simply amend the recommendation by 3/4 vote of all governing body members with no reference to the PUD. So I guess the question to you or to legal is whether or not amending the recommendation to approve a PUD is still on the table.
If I can address that.
Mr. Sublett?
Oh, excuse me.
Yes,
If I
go
may
ahead.
address that.
Go ahead.
You always have the option to amend whatever zoning recommendation is in front of you. You could amend it to whatever zoning you wanted to by 3/4 vote of the governing body. You could amend that. You could amend it to PUD. You could amend it to whatever you think the evidence supports and is presented to you. There was discussion of PUD, but that you're never just isolated to whatever the recommendation is. If you have the votes, you could amend it to whatever the evidence supports.
And if I received a background note on this, and to clarify, which is, first, we could adopt the recommendation to approve the C2 zoning, which is what the recommendation is, or we could amend the Planning Commission's recommendation and change it to a PUD. So we have either option. Either option could be considered by the council.
Okay. May I ask
Yeah,
another
Mr. Harvin.
question? Thank you. Bill, it's my understanding when this matter came before the Planning Commission, the Planning Department had proffered two options, either the C2 or the PUD, without recommending a preference as one to the other. Is that
That's correct.
correct? And we know that the Planning Commission at its April 15th meeting adopted the C2, and that is the recommendation that the Planning Commission made that is before us this evening. Was there discussion at the April 15th, 2013 Planning Commission meeting of the PUD?
There was discussion. It was presented to the Planning Commission, yes.
Yes, I understand it was presented, but my question was there discussion of the Planning Commission of the PUD option?
Minor, not, it was considered, but in terms of, was there a verbal discussion going on about the PUD and what's about, there wasn't much, no.
Well, I guess what troubles me is the posture in which this is before us. As the city attorney mentioned, we sit as a quasi-judicial body. Am I correct? And we can consider, in making our decision, we have to make our decision based on the record that is before us. And by record, I'm considering the minutes of the April 15, 2013 Planning Commission meeting. What troubles me is that we have two options that our Planning Department recommended to the Planning Commission. There is absolutely nothing in the record to indicate that the PUD option was even considered. Maybe it was considered, but there's no evidence in the record to indicate that it was considered. So for us to make a decision, either adopt the C2 or don't adopt the C2, or to adopt the PUD or not adopt the PUD, it troubles me that there is absolutely no consideration in the record of the consideration of the PUD. So I feel like we're being asked to make a decision, a quasi-judicial decision, based on an incomplete record. And that troubles me from a procedural point of view. I'm not opining a preference one way or the other, the C2 or the PUD. I'm not questioning I'm not opining that at all. And I don't want to be put in a position of having to speculate why the Planning Commission preferred the C2 to the PUD. So I'm having trouble with the posture at which this is before us. And if the chair would entertain a motion, I would move to remand this back to the Planning Commission so that we can have the minutes reflect a discussion by the Planning Commission on the PUD option. Again, I'm not saying that, I'm not asking them to change their opinion, I'm just saying that for us to do our job, I think we have to know that that second option was considered and discussed by the Planning Commission. And I don't see that in the record before us.
Okay.
That would be my motion.
Okay, and Mr. Harmon, and I have some wording here that of the various options, one of which is we can remand the zoning application back to the Planning Commission with a statement specifying the basis for the governing body's failure to approve or deny the recommendation. And it would be, and the reason is to have a clear statement of the PUD versus the C2.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this requires a simple majority vote of the governing body, 5 votes required. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Ortiz has seconded. Questions? And so we are now, discussion would be on remanding this back to the Planning Commission. Mrs. Everhart.
Thank you. I have a question for City Attorney. In doing that, if in fact we move to remand and send it back with specifically directing that they discuss the other option, my concern is, are we taking a position by doing that? Because if they didn't, I mean, if they made a recommendation, when we don't follow what the Planning Commission's recommendation is, what are we supposed to, be doing? I guess I'm a little concerned that we're not making a suggestion to them in some fashion.
Right. If I may.
Certainly.
And I guess I wanted to kind of clarify the direction, because one of the things we have to do is specify the basis of the failure to approve and recommend back. And I just wanted to get some clarification of what it was that you wanted the Planning Commission to do exactly, if you wanted them to have. I heard the word discussion, I heard the word including the minutes. Do you just want information that there was a discussion to be reflected? They just need some, I think the Planning Department is going to need some sort of direction of, if we remand it back, what is the expectation of council of what they do?
Yes, Mr. Howard.
Thank you. What my expectation would be is that there be discussion on the record as to what they like about the C2, what they don't like about the PUD, if that's the case. We just don't have anything to indicate that option 2 was thoroughly vetted before the Planning Commission, and the reasons for not bringing it forward with a positive recommendation.
Okay.
But I concur with Councilwoman Everhart. I don't want to make a bad situation worse.
Right.
And so I think we would need some guidance from you if you think that this is.
So is it fair to say that you would like to remand it back to the commission to discuss all appropriate zoning recommendations? Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Or the pros and cons, or the two sides, or some reasons for and against?
Sure.
Of the two, something like that. Mrs. Hiller?
We may have two different issues here. Where we're coming from is that these minutes appear quite sketchy. There is some documentation of discussion by Planning Commission members, although most of it is, we've got a staff proposal that spends a fair amount of time talking about PUD, but then we simply have testimony from proponents and opponents and a few questions. If those minutes are taped, so if that was discussed, it simply isn't reflected in the minutes, we could be simply asking for somebody to review the discussion and give us information that already happened. Then if it didn't happen at all, we're actually asking them to consider.
And I believe there is no time limit on this. I mean, it could be brought back, it goes back to the planning commission, and they handle it, and it can come back within, shortly thereafter. Is that correct?
I would say there's no time limit on it, but there is current litigation on this that's on hold, so the quicker that we can do this, I think the better off that we are.
Okay.
That would be,
Okay, good, well taken. I'm sorry, Mr. Harmon and Mrs. Everhart.
Well, Councilwoman Heller brings up a good point. Is there a tape recording of the April 15, 2013?
Yes, there's a video.
And if that video was reviewed, would there be on that video the discussion that I'm seeking? Like, I agree with Councilwoman Hiller. There's no reason to remand it back if that discussion in fact did take place, but is simply not reflected in the minutes.
If you're seeking discussion by the planning commission themselves, that is something we would have to review the tape on. There was definite citizens that came forward and talked about the issues that the PUD covers. But if you're looking for a planning commission discussion, we would have to review that again and see what that, if that was not reflected accurately in the minutes.
Mrs. Everhart and Mr. Colson.
Well, I guess my question, follow-up question would be then, understanding the concern, and I know this is a touchy issue with pending litigation, but I just need my own clarification before I vote on remanding, because I still feel like what we're doing is trying to tell the planning commission what they're going to discuss. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I mean, because there was a proposal that included both those options. Now, whether they discuss it or not, they chose this one and sent it to us. So if we remand it back, I mean, is it appropriate for us to tell them what they can or should be discussing? And that's a question for legal.
Mr. Sublette.
I think to instruct them of what they should be discussing, how the meeting should go. I don't think you give them instruction on what to discuss. I think you could give them instruction on to review the records, make sure the minutes accurately reflect what occurred at the meeting. I don't think that would be, I mean, I think that's perfectly fine, because you're not instructing them, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, but to review the record, make sure that we have an accurate reflection of the minutes.
Mr. Colson.
Thank you, Mayor. I was trying to have a quick conversation with the city attorney. I was seeing if there was an option available to us, which I'm not sure that there is, for us to table this item for a week and allow us to go back, review the tape, and make a determination as to whether there was some information there. But I'm not sure whether I can do that.
No, I think we would need to remand it back to the planning commission with specifying the basis for the governing body's failure and it to approve or deny. And I think from what I'm hearing, that's based on you would like the planning commission to make sure that the minutes accurately reflect what was discussed in that meeting to provide you a report. And then reset it after that. That's what I'm hearing. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But
Well, I heard it a little bit more of desiring to, well, the fact that we received the recommendation for the C2 without, from the minutes, little or no consideration of the PUD. And wanting to know a little bit more about perhaps the decision, the background for the decision. Now, I don't know if that's telling them what to do, but I think wanting to more of the basis of the recommendation.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair question.
You do?
Yeah, I think you can remand it back for a basis of what the decision, what the basis of the decision was. I think that's a fair question.
Okay, we have a motion to remand this ordinance zoning issue back to the planning commission. It was moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 8 yes and 1 no.
8 having voted yes, the ordinance is remanded back to the Planning Commission. We'll move on to item B, ordinance, zoning issue.
B is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at 2100 Southeast 29th Street from O and I2 Office and Institutional District to C4 Commercial District. Final reading.
Colson?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to ask Mr. Fyander to present and answer any questions on this item.
Thank you.
Mr. Fyander.
Thank you. The proposal to rezone is the property is located Southeast California and Southeast 29th. You may be familiar with it. There is a Dillon's grocery store on that intersection. There is a bank in front of that grocery store. This is the property that covers the bank, more specifically the UMB Bank. What is being proposed by Dillon's is to expand their store up to 22,000 square feet. The rezoning isn't necessary for the physical expansion necessarily of the building, but they do need the associated parking that goes with that. So to do the parking, they need to acquire the bank property and demolish the building to expand the parking lot. So this is what really the zoning is for. We have we are in agreement with the recommendation to go to C4. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan for locating major commercial activity at our arterial intersections, which this is. So Planning Commission recommended approval, staff recommends approval for the rezoning, and we ask for a motion to approve the ordinance and adopt the zoning change.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Mrs. Everhart?
Not a question, I was just gonna move adoption of
Okay.
the zoning request.
It has been moved. Is there a second? Mrs. Schwartz seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the zoning ordinance is passed. Item C on a zoning ordinance.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at 3213 Southeast 10th Street and 3233 Southeast 10th Street from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to I1 Light Industrial District. Final reading.
Mr. Colson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to keep rolling with Mr. Fyander.
Mr. Fyander.
Thank you again. The proposal is by Reese's Fine Foods to expand across Southeast Wittenberg Road behind their facility off of Southeast 10th to add a employee parking lot and also some room for a maintenance building. To do that, they need to rezone from R2 to R1 to I1 light industrial. The area is proposed in our comprehensive plan for future industrial growth, so it is consistent with the expansion that they're seeking. The Planning Commission recommended approval, and staff is recommending approval and ask that you move to adopt the ordinance and the zoning change.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Mrs. Ortiz?
No, I don't have a question. I just have a comment, and then I'd like to make a motion to approve the ordinance. Reese's is doing a fine job over there. I think this parking lot will help get cars off of 10th Street, which is actually a hill, a steep hill. And I know there's a lot of trucks that go through there to try to get back in there to unload or load or whatever they're doing. So I think this would be a great accomplishment for that. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Okay, it has been moved to approve the ordinance. Mr. Manspeaker?
Is it, so ex parte, all these rules confuse me. Is it okay to ask questions off of the concerns of staff?
Yeah, you can ask questions related to the report.
If I could hold, is there a second for the motion? Ms. Hiller seconds. Okay, now we'll have discussion.
Thank you. I just see there's a couple of things that concern me, and one is the water will be treated on site before it's returned to city property. Can you explain that?
For at the stage that they develop it, they will need to have detention for stormwater off the parking lot. So before it reaches, in this case, the street, there is stormwater quantity and quality requirements for them to take care of. And that would be approved. This zoning change doesn't do that. It would be approved when they come get their parking lot permit, and they would have the plans reviewed to have the stormwater meet our city codes.
Okay, and then a follow-up, if I may. It also mentions in here that we would have to improve Wittenberg Road leading into the parking lot. Improve.
Oh, improve. We being the city would not have to improve. They would, the developer would have to improve the drive from the road and connecting to the public road. It is their responsibility to pay for those improvements. If that helps answer the question.
Yeah, it didn't read that way in the concerns, but I guess if that's the.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
Nine yes.
9 having voted yes, the zoning ordinance is approved. Next, we go to 8, first readings.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by Section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at the rear of 1725 Northwest Topeka Boulevard from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to I1 Light Industrial District. First reading.
Thank you. Any miscellaneous items? We'll go to the presentations, first by the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I am very pleased at this time to ask Doug Whitaker to just come up so you can have a look at him. Doug is the freshly minted Public Works Director. Came to us from McPherson and served as the Public Works Director there for 4 years. But what really intrigued the committee who selected him was Doug has about 20-plus years of corporate engineering and project management experience and has a very substantial background. And as we went through the process of identifying a candidate and talking to Doug, he's very focused on comprehensive planning, very much a good committed to effective communication. And, we got him started yesterday, and I think he's probably asking himself, what did I sign myself up for? There seems to be a lot of work, and I think my boss might be crazy. So welcome, Doug, and we're excited to have you here.
Welcome. I'm glad to have you here, and we expect, of course, major changes immediate in the public works, streets, potholes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
And I look forward to working with each and every one of you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. I have just sent around a copy of a sheet that lists 3 council, in a sense, boards that we appoint. And just to bring it to your attention and also to the public, there are 3 boards that particularly have difficulty filling because of a lack of applicants. The first is the Americans for Disabilities Act Advisory Council, 5 positions. You see there, the nominees have to live within the city. And however, the nominees must be individuals with disabilities in one of these areas of vision, hearing, walking, speaking, learning, or breathing. And of course, that makes it challenging to fill it. However, this is an important council because we receive ADA funds, and this council then is involved, that we have to show that interest in the process of receiving the funds. So if there are people watching, hearing, that would meet this criteria, I ask you to speak to your council member, or you can self-nominate on the website. The Jayhawk Area Agency on Aging, we have several positions vacant. Nominees must reside in the city. The board represents 3 counties, and actually the meetings are during the day, and they rotate among the counties. So again, that's a challenge for some people to serve. And then the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board, there's 3 vacant positions. Again, it has to be someone inside the city and have, as you note there, an interest or experience, background in sustainability issues such as waste reduction, recycling, conservation, similar fields. And again, it shows the meeting time for that is 7:30 in the morning. But again, if we want to have all of our boards filled adequately, so we encourage people to self-nominate, contact your council member. All these positions first are received, they have to be a nomination from a council member. And then they are nominated to the mayor for a selection that then is approved by the council. So if you have any questions about that, you could call the city, and we'll certainly get the information to you. Mrs. Everhart. Okay, Mrs. De La Isla, Mr. Manspeaker, Mrs. Schwartz.
Yes, just on the neighborhood summit thing, on the neighborhood summit, and I said my homework is going to be to start a neighborhood association. It must have been a good thing, because I've had 2 different neighborhoods ask me for information on how to develop a neighborhood association. So District 7 should have maybe 3 neighborhood associations soon. Thank you.
Mr. Arbin, Mrs. Hiller.
Gosh, I have a short list. I'll go through them quickly. Just wanted to remind everyone for Bike Month that the Ride with the City Manager is this Thursday, 1 p.m., starting at City Hall. The public is welcome. There's also another organization, the Prairie Packers, that are doing a family ride on the 25th of May. That's Saturday over Memorial Day weekend, and they're starting in the lot at Core First on East 6th Street and going to ride the Shunga Trail that's on the east side. It's a family ride, wonderful ride, 9 a.m. Saturday, the 25th of May. Brown versus Board also. I've been talking with the city manager about getting a longer presentation, but there is a lot of people will have family in for graduations and for Memorial Day. There is a new full National Park Service tour of historical sites in Topeka. It's called Brown to Brown. There are 16 historical sites. You can get, I've got single copies for everybody here, but people can pick these up at Brown versus Board of Education, the Monroe School, also at the Capitol Building, and also at Visit Topeka. The nice thing about this is you can go as much as you want. The way you get the audio on it is to use your cell phone and call a number, and it gives you the overall introduction, and then you punch in a different extension for each stop. So encourage everybody to get those, and I'll pass them around here. Visit Topeka also has introduced their summer bingo contest. You can get those forms at Visit Topeka or online, but that is something people can do in very short order or spend the summer. The contest forms are due the end of July, and there are prizes similar to their treasure hunt in prior years, where it's to introduce visitors or people who live here to Topeka. So, and on a staff note, I learned over the last couple of weeks and wanted to say thank you and good luck to both our city traffic engineer, Linda Voss, who has been really wonderful to work with on a lot of our street projects, as well as Scott Elisaglu, who has staffed the sustainability board that we just talked about. He's been a grant writer and has been very visionary and a great communicator about sustainability as we established our full sustainability plan and began to take steps toward it. So I wish them both well. And I also wish Council Member Andrew Gray well in his future. It's been a pleasure to serve with him. Thank you.
Mr. Campos, Mrs. Ortiz.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone that this is going to be a busy weekend with the races in town and graduations, and there's a lot out there to do. And I also wanted to say, with the opening of the alligator at the zoo, I got a report from a 6-year-old little boy that said it was just phenomenal. So I will renew my membership another year. Thank you.
Thank you. We had one person sign for public comment, Martin Minos. I don't believe, I understood that he would not be here. There is no other agenda items. The meeting is adjourned.